It was supposed to be a normal Sunday, with the warmth of coffee brewing in the background and sunlight gently peeking through the blinds. But that morning, my phone buzzed with a text that shattered the comfort I had come to expect. It was from Rachel, my daughter-in-law, the woman I had helped countless times over the years. It wasn't the usual message asking for help with the bills or a new car. No, this time it was different. "Mom, we need to talk about the money. It's time to stop. We can't keep relying on you anymore." I stared at the screen for what seemed like an eternity. My heart sank. I had always given freely, thinking that by helping them, I was ensuring their success, providing them with opportunities I had never had growing up. But now, Rachel was asking me to stop, to take a step back, to let go. I didn't know how to respond at first. Rachel had always been high maintenance, asking for more than I could sometimes give. But this was the first time she had put it so bluntly. The frustration and confusion in her words stung deeply. I wasn't just a source of income for them, I was family. I thought that was what mattered most. But now it seemed I was simply a burden. I typed back, "What do you mean? You've been asking for help for years, Rachel. Now you want me to stop?" The response came quickly. "Yes, we've realized we've been taking advantage of your generosity. It's time we stood on our own 2 feet. Please understand." The words stung, cutting deeper than anything I had ever felt from her. I sat there, frozen, the weight of her message pressing on my chest. For years I had given, and now they were telling me to stop. It wasn't just the money, it was my role in their lives. My purpose. Had it all been so easily dismissed? I sat for hours, thinking, wondering, replaying everything. Had I done the right thing? Had I been too generous? Was this the right thing to do? Was this really about my generosity? Or was it about something else? Something deeper? The answer came slowly, but steadily. It was time to stop. I had spent years sacrificing for them, always thinking that by helping, I was giving them the best. But in the end, I had been enabling them, not helping them grow. They had become dependent on me in ways that no longer felt healthy, no longer felt like love. It wasn't love, it was control. My control, their control. It was a tangled mess of good intentions that had gone too far. So I did what I had to do. I picked up the phone and called my financial advisor, the man who had managed my fortune for years. "Freeze everything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to cut off their access. Freeze their accounts, everything." His voice on the other end hesitated for only a moment. "Are you sure, Mrs. Armstrong? This could cause some tension. They rely on you. And—" "I'm sure," I interrupted. "It's time." I hung up, a coldness settling over me. The phone call felt final, almost irreversible. There was no going back now. I had severed the connection that had always been there, the bond I had so freely given. I had given them everything, but now I had to take it back. Not because I didn't love them, but because they needed to understand the cost of relying on me, the true value of independence. The next few days were eerily quiet. I didn't hear from Andrew or Rachel at all. I wondered if they were waiting for me to apologize, to reverse my decision. But I knew I couldn't. The silence was the first indication I had that they were beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. But the silence was also deafening. My phone never buzzed, no messages, no calls. It was as if they were paralyzed by the loss of what they had come to expect from me. By the time the week passed, the weight of my decision became unbearable. I had been firm, resolute in my choice, but I couldn't help but feel guilty. Was this too harsh? Would this destroy our relationship forever? Would Andrew and Rachel even come back to me after this? I wasn't sure. I wasn't ready for the aftermath. Then, on a Wednesday evening, the phone rang. I could see Andrew's name on the caller ID. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what to expect, but I braced myself. This could go in any direction. "Mom?" His voice sounded small, almost hesitant. "Can we talk?" I swallowed hard. I had been expecting this. And yet, I still wasn't ready. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. What's on your mind? I don't understand why you did this, Mom, he began, his words clipped with frustration. We're struggling here. You know how much we need that money. You know how much we've come to rely on you. And now you're cutting us off? I could hear his frustration, his confusion. It was hard not to feel sympathy. But I had made my decision. I know it's hard, Andrew, I said calmly. But it's not about punishing you. It's about teaching you to stand on your own 2 feet. You've always had me to rely on. But now you need to learn how to handle things without me. I can't be your safety net anymore. But we've always had you. How do we just stop? He was almost pleading now, but I couldn't back down. Because you need to stop. You've never learned how to manage things yourself. This isn't just about money. It's about your independence. I've given you everything, Andrew. But it's time to let you learn the hard way. You can't expect me to keep fixing everything for you. There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, his thoughts working through the words I had said. Finally, he spoke again. I know you're right, he said quietly, the guilt now evident in his voice. We've been selfish. We've depended on you too much. I don't know how to make it right, Mom, but I will. I promise. I exhaled slowly, feeling a sense of relief flood through me. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. And that was more than I had hoped for. I know it's hard, Andrew. But I believe in you. You'll figure it out. You both will. The days following my decision felt like an eternity. I sat in my quiet house, the weight of my choice pressing down on me. But a strange sense of relief also began to settle in. There was no denying the relief that came from knowing I had taken control of the situation. I had set the boundaries, something I had struggled to do for years. I had been the one who always said yes, the one who had made the sacrifices, the one who had been the reliable safety net. But now, it was time for Andrew and Rachel to learn to stand on their own, even if it meant creating a distance between us. The silence from my son and daughter-in-law was deafening. I hadn't heard from Andrew or Rachel for days, and part of me wondered if I had made a mistake. Did they understand why I did this? Would they even forgive me? There were moments when I would pick up the phone to call them, but then I'd stop myself, reminding myself that I had to be firm. I had to let them face the consequences. I wasn't doing this to punish them. I was doing it to force them to grow up. I busied myself with work, focusing on the things I had been neglecting for the past few years. I took on new projects that excited me, rediscovered old hobbies, and spent time reflecting on my life. I had put my own desires and needs aside for far too long, and now it was time to focus on myself. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, the weight of the situation loomed over me. It was as if I could feel the tension in the air, thick with unspoken words and unmet expectations. And then, on the 6th day after I had made the call to freeze their accounts, my phone rang. It was Andrew. I hadn't expected it to come from him. I had thought Rachel, with her strong personality and sharp tongue, would be the first to reach out, to try and fix things. But no. It was Andrew. His voice was strained, and there was an underlying tension in his words. "Mom," he began, his voice tight with frustration. "I don't know what's going on. Why can't we access anything? What did you do?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I froze everything, Andrew. You and Rachel need to learn how to manage without me. I've always been there, always helping you both, but it's time for you to stand on your own. I'm not going to keep enabling you." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him struggling to process what I had said. "But Mom, you've always helped us. We've relied on you for everything. And now you're cutting us off? What are we supposed to do?" I could feel my heart breaking, hearing the desperation in his voice. But I couldn't back down. "You're supposed to figure it out. You and Rachel both need to learn responsibility. You've been living off me for far too long, and now it's time for you to do it on your own." "I don't know how to do this, Mom," he said quietly, his voice softer now. I've never had to manage this kind of responsibility. I've always had you to fall back on. And that's exactly the problem, I said, my voice calm but firm. I've been your fallback for years, Andrew. But you can't keep depending on me forever. It's time for you to grow up. There was another long silence before he spoke again, his words almost choking on his frustration. I get it, I do. But it's hard, Mom. You've always been there for us, and now it feels like you're abandoning us. I'm not abandoning you, I said softly. I'm teaching you to be independent. I'm teaching you how to manage your life without my help. You'll be better for it, Andrew. You have to trust me. I don't know if I can do it, Mom, he said, his voice cracking. I don't know if I can stand on my own. You can, I said firmly. But you won't know until you try. I believe in you. But I can't keep doing it for you. You have to do it for yourself. There was a long pause before he finally spoke again, his voice calmer now. I'm sorry, Mom, I know I've taken you for granted. I didn't realize how much I was depending on you. I'll figure it out, I promise. I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. Good. I'll always be here to support you. But it's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet. The next few days passed in uneasy silence. I didn't hear from Andrew or Rachel, and that only added to the tension I felt. I wondered if they were truly processing everything or if they were just angry. Were they ashamed, or did they feel like I had betrayed them? I didn't know, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of my decision. I knew it was right, but it didn't make it easier. It didn't make the distance between us any less painful. Then, exactly 1 week after I had frozen their accounts, Rachel called. The sound of her voice on the other end of the line was unexpected. She had always been the one to be bold and assertive, and now, she sounded tired, almost defeated. Mom, she said quietly. I know you're upset with us, and I understand why. But I need to apologize. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure I was ready to forgive her. I wasn't sure I could just let everything go. But I also knew that this was a step forward. And that was important. I know we've taken advantage of you, and I know we've made mistakes, Rachel continued. I can't keep asking you for help, and I'm sorry. I should have been more responsible. I should have never put you in this position. Her words were sincere, but there was a part of me that still felt wary. How much of this was real? How much of this was just her trying to manipulate me back into the role of caretaker? I'm glad you understand, Rachel, I said cautiously. But understanding is only part of it. You need to prove it. I can't just go back to how things were. You have to show me that you can handle this. I will, Mom, she said, her voice steady now. I'll figure it out. I promise. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, and part of me wanted to believe her. But I had learned the hard way that promises were easy to make and hard to keep. Still, I had to believe that this was the start of something new. The days that followed felt like a slow rebuilding process. I didn't hear from Rachel or Andrew as much as I had before, but there was a quiet understanding between us now. They were figuring things out, learning how to live without my constant support. I saw changes in them, but they were slow and steady. Andrew had taken on extra hours at work, and Rachel had started a small online business to help contribute to their household. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I kept my distance, giving them space to grow. But I also made sure to check in every now and then, offering advice when needed but never stepping in to fix things for them. They needed to learn that life didn't come with a safety net, and I needed to learn how to trust them again. The days following Rachel's call were some of the hardest I had ever faced. For years, I had been the one who filled the gaps in their lives. I had been the constant support, the one they could always turn to. And now, by cutting them off, I felt a deep, almost physical loss. My role in their lives had been severed, and though I knew it was necessary, it still stung. I kept busy with work, filling my time with tasks and responsibilities. But even in the bustle of my professional life, my mind would drift back to Andrew and Rachel. How were they adjusting? Were they managing? And most importantly, Were they angry at me? I knew I had made the right decision, but the silence between us grew heavier with each passing day. It wasn't just the silence from them. It was the silence from within me, too. I had spent so many years giving without question, pouring myself into my family, that I didn't know how to just stop. How did I redefine myself? How did I separate my identity from the role of the giver? Was there even room for me to be anything else? Then, exactly 2 weeks after I had frozen their access, the phone rang again. This time, it was Andrew. His voice on the other end of the line was calmer than it had been the last time we spoke. There was no panic, no frustration. Just quiet resolution. "Mom," he began, his voice steady, "I've been thinking about everything you said. About how we've relied on you for everything and how we've taken advantage of you. And, well, I think we've been blind." I could hear the weight of his words, the sincerity behind them. "What do you mean, Andrew?" I asked, my voice softening. "You're not the only one who's had to think about this. It's not easy. But this is something that needed to happen." "I know," he said quietly. "But the more I think about it, the more I realize that I haven't been living my life. I've been letting you fix everything for me, and I never stopped to wonder why. You were always there, and I always knew you would be, but I never had to earn that. I just expected it." I closed my eyes, the weight of his words settling into my chest. "That's exactly it, Andrew. You and Rachel never had to face the consequences of your choices because I was always there to catch you. And that's not healthy. Not for you, not for me." There was silence for a moment. I could tell he was processing, trying to make sense of everything. "I don't want to be this person anymore, Mom. I don't want to depend on you. I've been working extra hours at the restaurant, and Rachel's been starting her own business. It's tough, but it feels right. I've never had to do this before, but I can't keep living like this. I can't keep living in your shadow, in your generosity." I felt a pang in my heart. The son I had known all these years was beginning to emerge from the cocoon of dependence. There was a quiet pride that swelled inside me. It wasn't easy, but he was beginning to understand. "You're doing the right thing, Andrew," I said softly. "But it's going to take time. It's going to be hard, and there will be times when you feel like giving up. But this is how you grow. This is how you learn." "I know, Mom, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. For not seeing it before. For taking you for granted." I paused, feeling a mixture of sadness and hope. "You're learning, Andrew. That's what matters. You're making the choice to change. And I'm proud of you for that. But just remember, this isn't a one-time thing. It's a journey. And you have to walk it, step by step." "I will, Mom," he said quietly. "I promise." We said our goodbyes, and the conversation ended with a quiet sense of closure. I felt a weight lift off my chest. But the uncertainty still lingered. Was it enough? Was this the real change I had hoped for? The silence that followed the call was filled with both relief and doubt. I couldn't deny that things had changed. But how deep did that change go? And would it stick? A week passed before I heard from Rachel again. This time, it was a message brief. But to the point. "Mom, can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected Rachel to reach out, at least not this soon. Would she be angry? Would she challenge my decision again? Was she still as resolute in her views as she had been when we last spoke? I agreed to meet her at a local cafe, the same place where we had met for countless coffee dates in the past. When she arrived, I noticed immediately how different she looked. There was a weariness in her eyes, a kind of tiredness that only comes from facing the reality of your own shortcomings. "Mom," she said as she sat down across from me. Her voice was quieter than usual, softer. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what you said, and I want to apologize." I blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in her voice. "Rachel, I know I've been selfish. I know I've depended on you for everything," she continued. I didn't realize how much I had been taking from you until you cut me off, until you froze everything. I was angry at first, but now, I see it. I see that you were right. I felt a lump form in my throat. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected Rachel to take responsibility so quickly, to acknowledge the truth in such a direct way. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she continued, her voice shaking slightly. I've started my own business and it's tough. But it feels like the right thing to do. I know it's not perfect, but it's mine. I'm doing it on my own. And I don't want to rely on you anymore. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm proud of you, Rachel. I really am. But this isn't just about making a change, it's about proving it. You have to show me that you're serious. You've made the right first steps, but you can't stop now. I won't, Mom, she said, her voice filled with determination. I'll prove it to you. I'll prove that I can do this. I don't want to depend on you anymore. I don't want to live like this. And in that moment, I saw it, the shift. It wasn't a dramatic change, but it was real. Rachel was starting to understand. She was learning what I had hoped they both would learn, that love, while generous, has its limits. And the road to independence is paved with hard work and responsibility. The conversation with Rachel, like the one with Andrew, marked a turning point. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a start. I knew that rebuilding trust and independence would take time, but the seeds of change had been planted. The silence that followed Rachel's visit lingered, but not in the way it had before. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, one that hinted at change. But it wasn't quite enough to erase the uncertainty that still hovered between us. I had made the decision to cut them off financially, to stop enabling their reliance on me, but I had to admit that it felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, waiting for them to either rise to the occasion or fall back into old habits. Rachel had promised that she would prove herself, and Andrew had said the same thing, but I knew better than to believe that change would come overnight. It took years for them to become so dependent on me, and it would take more than a few weeks or months to undo it. But something about their words, something in the way they both seemed to genuinely understand what they had done, made me hold on to the faint hope that things could improve. As for me, I continued with my own life, which, for the first time in a long time, felt like my own again. I focused on my work, picked up old hobbies I had long neglected, and began to carve out time for myself. It was hard to shake the guilt at first, the guilt of leaving them to figure things out on their own, but I reminded myself that this was necessary. They needed to face the reality of their own lives without my support. A call from Andrew. It wasn't long before I heard from Andrew again. I had expected his silence to stretch longer, but when the phone rang, I picked it up with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. I could hear his voice on the other end, not the frustration or panic I had heard before, but something calmer, more resolved. Mom, I need to talk to you, he said, his voice low but not defeated. I've been thinking about everything. About what you said. About how I've been relying on you for everything. I braced myself. There was no going back now. I had already set the boundaries. But hearing him speak in this way, measured, introspective, made my heart ache. I wanted to believe in him. I wanted to believe that this time, he truly understood. What is it, Andrew? I asked, my voice steady but laced with caution. I don't want to keep leaning on you, he said. I've been looking for ways to support myself. I started working more hours at the restaurant, and I've been trying to save what I can, but I still feel, I don't know, lost. I never really had to do this before. You've always been there, and now that you're not, I feel like I'm floundering. His words stung in a way I didn't expect. I had cut them off, I had forced them to grow up, and yet hearing his vulnerability made me second-guess myself. Had I pushed them too hard? Was I wrong to take such drastic steps? I know it's hard, I said, my voice softening. But this is what you needed. You've been relying on me for too long, Andrew. It's time you learned to stand on your own. It's not going to be easy, but you can't keep looking to me to fix everything. I know, he said quietly, his voice breaking with emotion. I know, Mom, but I need your help, in the right way. I need you to trust me. I can't do this alone, and I don't want to. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with the truth of his dependency. I had trusted him, but now, I had to trust that he would live up to the promise he had made to change. I had to trust that he was finally ready to take responsibility. I trust you, Andrew, I said, the words coming out with surprising ease. But trust doesn't mean I'll always be there to catch you. It means I believe in your ability to handle what's coming, even when it's hard. Rachel's unexpected visit. The next day, Rachel showed up at my doorstep unannounced. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her yet, but there she was, standing in front of me with a look of determination in her eyes. Gone was the defensive attitude she had carried for so long. In its place was something quieter, more vulnerable, and surprisingly, sincere. "Mom," she said softly, "can we talk?" I stepped aside to let her in, my heart racing. We had both been through so much, and I wasn't sure where this conversation would lead. But I knew we needed to have it. She sat down across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The tension was palpable, but there was something different about this silence. It wasn't the silence of avoidance. It was the silence of two people who knew they had to confront the hard truths between them. Finally, Rachel spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about everything. About you freezing the accounts. About how you've been there for us all this time. And how we've taken you for granted. And I realize now that I've been wrong." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had expected her to be angry, to try and justify her behavior. But instead, she was acknowledging everything I had hoped to hear. She was admitting what I had always known, what they had both needed to realize. "I've been selfish, Mom," she continued. "I've depended on you for everything. I've used you, and I hate that. I want to change. I don't want to be this person anymore." My heart swelled with a mixture of relief and hope. It wasn't easy to hear the admission, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was a start. She was ready to change. She had recognized her mistakes. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," I said quietly. "But change doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take time and it's going to take effort. But you can do it. I know you can." "I will," she said, her voice steady. "I don't want to rely on you anymore. I want to prove that I can stand on my own." The slow process of change. The weeks that followed were filled with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Both Andrew and Rachel had started down the path of self-sufficiency. Andrew was working more hours at his job, taking on responsibilities he had previously shied away from. Rachel had started a small online business, something she had always been passionate about but had never pursued because she had relied on me for financial stability. It wasn't easy. They stumbled, they struggled, and there were days when they both felt like giving up. But they kept going. They kept fighting. And little by little, I could see the changes in them. Andrew was beginning to take responsibility for his financial situation, and Rachel was learning the value of hard work. I had to admit that the progress, though slow, was there. They were no longer the people who had leaned on me for everything. They were learning how to manage their own lives, how to make decisions without relying on me to bail them out. A new beginning. The day came when I saw them both sitting in front of me, Andrew with a tired but proud look on his face, and Rachel with the same quiet determination I had seen in her when she first walked through my door. They were different people now, changed in ways that could only come through hard work and facing the consequences of their actions. "I want to say thank you," Andrew said, his voice sincere, "for making us realize what we needed to learn. I've learned more about myself in these past few months than I have in the past few years. And I'm grateful for that." Rachel nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I've learned to appreciate everything you've done for us, Mom. But I don't want to depend on you anymore. I want to stand on my own. To be someone you can be proud of." I smiled at them both, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and love. "I am proud of you both." You've come so far, and I know there will be more challenges ahead. But you're doing it. You're living up to the promises you made." They were finally on their way on their own 2 feet, no longer relying on me to fix everything. It hadn't been an easy road, but it had been the right one. And as I looked at them, I realized that this was the first day of the rest of their lives, and the rest of mine. End of chapter 4. In this chapter, both Andrew and Rachel make significant strides in becoming self-sufficient. Their hard work and perseverance begin to show, and the protagonist sees the fruits of her difficult decision. While the road to change is not yet complete, there is hope for the future. The months that followed Andrew and Rachel's slow journey toward independence were not without their struggles, but they were filled with something far more important: growth. I saw it in their faces when we spoke, in their actions, and even in their silences. The tension, though still there at times, had started to loosen, replaced by a quiet but tangible shift in our family dynamics. It wasn't easy, and I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but I felt a sense of accomplishment, of peace, that I hadn't known in years. I had spent so much time being everything for everyone. The provider, the problem solver, the one who always knew what to do, when to step in, and when to help. But in doing so, I had lost myself. I had given everything I had, emotionally and financially, without ever asking myself if I was getting anything back, not in the form of material wealth, but in love, respect, and reciprocity. And now, for the first time, I was starting to live for myself. It was hard to describe how liberating that felt, but there was a subtle joy in finding the space to breathe again, to make decisions that weren't dictated by the needs of my family. I had been so immersed in their lives, their struggles, that I hadn't realized how much of myself I had given away. But now, as Andrew and Rachel began to stand on their own, I began to rediscover who I was. And it wasn't just about enjoying the quiet moments alone in my house, or the time spent focusing on my career. It was about finding my own purpose again. A conversation with Andrew. One chilly autumn evening, just as the sun began to set, I received a call from Andrew. His voice sounded calm, almost steady, so much different from the frantic, guilt-ridden tone he had carried in the past. It was a strange but welcome change. "Mom," he began, his voice low but confident. "I've been meaning to talk to you. I've been working extra hours at the restaurant, and it's hard, but I feel good. I've been saving, trying to get ahead. It's not easy, but I'm learning." I couldn't help but smile. "I'm proud of you, Andrew. It sounds like you're really taking charge of your life." "I am," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "And I want to thank you for everything. I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but cutting me off, that was the hardest thing you could have done. But it was also the best thing. I needed that push. I've learned more about myself these past few months than I have in years." I felt a lump form in my throat, a mixture of relief and happiness. "I'm glad, Andrew. I really am. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was necessary, and you're doing it. You're proving that you can handle this on your own." There was a pause before he spoke again. "I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. For everything. I know I've been selfish, and I know I haven't always been the son you needed me to be. But I'm trying, and I'm going to keep trying. I owe it to you, and to myself." I closed my eyes, letting his words sink in. I had hoped for this moment, but I hadn't expected it to come so soon. So sincerely. "I'm proud of you, Andrew. And I believe in you." We spoke for a little while longer, but that conversation marked a turning point for both of us. Andrew wasn't the same man he had been when I made the difficult decision to freeze his access to my finances. He had finally come to terms with his own independence, and that was a victory for both of us. Rachel's progress. Rachel, too, was making strides, though her journey was slower and more reluctant. She had started her online business, just as she promised, but I could tell she was struggling. The business was taking off slowly, and I could hear the frustration in her voice when we spoke. She hadn't found the easy path that she had hoped for, and I could hear the doubts creeping into her tone. One afternoon she called me, and this time there was no sense of entitlement in her voice. Instead, there was exhaustion, emotional, and physical fatigue that came from trying to prove herself. "Mom," she said quietly, "I know you've been waiting for me to get it together, and I want to thank you for giving me the space to do it. But I'm struggling. This business is harder than I thought. I don't know if I'm cut out for this." Her words hit me in a way I didn't expect. I wanted to offer comfort, to step in and tell her everything would be okay. But I knew better than that. This was her journey, not mine. She had to learn how to fight through her struggles, just as I had. "I know it's hard, Rachel," I said softly, "but this is what you've been asking for. This is how you prove to yourself and to me that you can stand on your own. It's not going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." "I know," she replied, her voice shaky. "I just didn't expect it to be this hard. I thought I could just jump into it and everything would fall into place. But it's not like that. And I feel like I've let you down." "Rachel, you haven't let me down," I said, my voice firm but filled with compassion. "This is about you. This isn't about proving anything to me. You're doing this for yourself. And if it gets hard, that's part of it. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep going." "I will," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I promise, Mom. I'll keep going." And I believed her. I believed that Rachel, despite her initial resistance, was starting to see the value of the struggle. She was finally learning that the easy way was not always the best way, and that hard work and perseverance would pay off in ways that quick fixes never could. The new dynamic. As the months passed, I watched both of them change, slowly but surely. Andrew and Rachel were learning to rely on themselves. And while it wasn't easy, they were both making progress. I still wasn't ready to fully open my heart and finances to them, but I could see that they were beginning to understand the lesson I had been trying to teach them all along. Our relationship had shifted, and though it was painful, it was necessary. The boundaries I had set, though hard, had given them the space to grow. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. I wasn't the crutch anymore. I wasn't the one they depended on for everything. They were beginning to stand on their own. As for me, I began to reclaim parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of my family's needs. I traveled more. I pursued new opportunities. I focused on the things that made me happy, not because I was selfish, but because I had finally realized that I needed to be whole to truly give to others. My life was no longer centered around their expectations. It was centered around mine. As the weeks turned into months, the rhythm of our lives began to settle into a new pattern. The silence I had felt before, the quiet that followed my decision to cut them off, had gradually shifted. It was no longer a silence of discomfort or tension, but one of cautious optimism. There was still so much that had to be rebuilt: trust, communication, and above all, the understanding that things would never go back to how they were. But the foundation had been set, and it was stronger than I had ever anticipated. Andrew and Rachel had changed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but change nonetheless. I saw it in the way Andrew carried himself now, with more confidence and responsibility. He wasn't just the young man who had relied on me to make his life easier. He was starting to find his own path, one step at a time. The part-time job he had taken at the restaurant had now become a full-time position. He had even started saving, not just for himself, but to contribute to their family's expenses. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The early signs of a man learning to stand on his own. Rachel, on the other hand, had struggled more. Her online business was still in its infancy, and I could hear the frustration in her voice when we spoke. The confidence she had once worn so boldly seemed to have waned, replaced by the humbling realization that success wasn't handed to you, it was earned. But I could also hear the determination in her words, the quiet promise she made to herself and to me that she would see it through. She wasn't the woman I had known, entitled, demanding, but a woman fighting to prove her worth, not to me, but to herself. I had given them both the space they needed to learn, and now, as I saw them grappling with their own futures, I felt something unexpected. Pride. It wasn't the pride I had once felt when they asked for my help, when I could give without question. It was the pride of seeing them take ownership of their lives, making their own decisions, and handling their struggles with a new sense of responsibility. But even as I watched their transformation, I knew that the journey wasn't over. There were still obstacles ahead, challenges that would test their resolve, and setbacks that would make them question their progress. But they had learned something important, something I had been trying to teach them for years: independence. The first real conversation. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Andrew called again. This time, his voice was different. Gone was the frustration and guilt that had once colored his words. There was a new sense of clarity in the way he spoke, as if he had finally come to terms with who he was and what he wanted from life. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking about everything. About the past. About everything you did for us. And about how we've treated you." I didn't interrupt, knowing that this was his moment, his chance to say what had been left unsaid for so long. There was no rush. "I'm sorry," he continued, his voice steady. "For taking you for granted, for making you feel like you had to carry us. I should have stepped up sooner. I should have taken responsibility for my life." "I know you're sorry, Andrew," I said, my voice soft. "But it's not just about saying sorry. It's about what comes after. It's about showing that you've learned and that you're willing to keep learning." "I know," he said quietly. "I'm doing it, Mom. I'm working full-time at the restaurant now. I've even started saving, not just for me but for the future. I'm making decisions for myself now. I can't fix everything that's happened, but I can make sure I never repeat the same mistakes." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time in years, I believed him. The man on the other end of the line was different. He wasn't the same person who had called me just a few months ago, begging for help. He was stepping into his own life, and it was more than I had ever hoped for. "I'm proud of you, Andrew," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're doing it. You're taking the right steps. It's not going to be easy, but you're doing it." There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom. I had to hit rock bottom to realize how much I've relied on you, and I'll never take you for granted again." "I believe you," I said, feeling a mixture of relief and hope. "But remember, this isn't just about me. It's about you, your future, your life." "I know," he replied, and I could hear the determination in his voice. "I'll make you proud." Rachel's continued struggles. After my conversation with Andrew, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure, but the next call came from Rachel. She had been quiet for a while, focusing on her business and trying to push through the inevitable frustrations that came with starting something from scratch. But when I picked up the phone, I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the weight of the struggles she had been carrying. "Mom?" she began, her tone heavy. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. My business is struggling. I don't have enough customers. And I'm running out of ideas. I thought I could handle it, but it's harder than I imagined." I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but I knew this was her challenge to face, not mine. "It's hard, Rachel. I know it's hard. But this is the price of independence. You've chosen to do this on your own, and you're going to have setbacks. But you have to keep going. You can't give up now." "I know," she said quietly. "But sometimes I feel like I'm failing. I feel like I'm not cut out for this." "You're cut out for it," I said firmly. "You're learning, and that's what matters. No one starts out perfect, Rachel. No one gets everything right the first time. But you're doing it. You're putting in the work, and that's the only way to succeed." She was quiet for a moment, as if she were processing my words. "You're right, Mom. I can't keep expecting things to fall into place. I have to keep pushing. I'm going to find a way." "I know you will," I said softly. "Just don't give up. You're stronger than you think." The final realization. The weeks that followed Rachel's struggles were filled with more phone calls, more heart-to-heart talks, and more moments of uncertainty. But through it all, Something had shifted. I had given them the space to fail, the space to struggle, and they had started to realize just how much they had taken for granted. Andrew had found his footing, working full-time, saving money, and slowly learning the lessons I had been trying to teach him. Rachel was still in the thick of her struggle, but she was determined to make her business work, despite the challenges she faced. I realized that they weren't the same people they had been just months ago. They were becoming adults. The kind of adults who understood that life wasn't handed to you, it was earned. And I had to let go. It wasn't easy, and it didn't feel good all the time. But I knew deep down that this was the best thing I could have done for them. As for me, I had learned something too. I had learned that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let go. To stop being the fixer, the provider, and start being something else, someone who could focus on their own happiness and needs. I wasn't just a mother or a provider. I was a person with my own goals and dreams, and I had to reclaim that.